Today we are so excited. Tara and I have a special guest, Dr. Heidi Brocke, from the very popular podcast, It's Not Normal, It's Toxic. Dr. Heidi is going to share some of her personal journey along with some key red flags to watch out for in the beginning and middle of a new relationship. And have you signed up for our free Substack newsletter? Each week you'll receive practical insights and additional takeaways and resources. To join, look for the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy, a mental health specialist with over 20 years of counseling experience.
And I'm Tara Blair-Ball, a certified relationship coach.
This is a listener-supported podcast. Please consider becoming a supporter of the show for less than a cup of coffee. You can see a link in the show notes below.
Today, we're going to be interviewing Dr. Heidi. So Dr. Heidi is a toxic relationship awareness and healing specialist. She has helped hundreds rid and heal their toxic relationships and hosts the popular podcast, It's Not Normal, It's Toxic, Rid Your Life of Toxic People, with over 1 million downloads worldwide. She's an international keynote speaker, recipient of Empowering Women in Business of the Year Award by Inspiring Lives magazine, and has been featured in both Forbes and Time magazine. Thank you for being here, Heidi. We're so excited about you joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'll update one of those stats, and not because I want to brag, because I'm a very bad bragger. We are at 2 million downloads now.
Yay!
And the only reason I say that is because you guys know this just like I do. I cannot believe how many people are after this information, because I started the podcast to start talking about something I never talked about, not knowing people would listen. So it's been huge. And my husband kind of calls my work a ministry. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm thankful that you guys that we're all in this together, because we couldn't do it by ourselves.
Yeah. So Heidi, we'd love to talk to you about sort of red flags in toxic relationships, whether it's thinking back to maybe some red flags you missed in your previous toxic relationships, or red flags you walk clients through as they're dating again after leaving a toxic relationship.
Okay. Well, red flags, that is huge. That's a term that we hear all the time. You know, nobody's talking about green flags these days. Everybody's talking about red flags. So a little bit about my past really quick is I was raised on a dairy farm in a little tiny Christian community right by Bozeman, Montana. Okay. Now, 2 years ago, nobody knew where Bozeman was, but since Yellowstone came out, everybody's like, oh, we know where Bozeman is. But it was kind of a community that, you know, it was church based. So there was a Christian school there also. So I saw the same people for the first 18 years of my life. And from a perspective, when you grow up in a situation, very small townish, everybody knew everybody took care of everybody, you know, if you did one thing wrong, so-and-so's parents is going to call your parents. So you didn't really get away with anything. And so when I left that community, I think I really thought that everyone operated that way. Everybody had your best interest in mind. Everybody cared, you know, that kind of thing. Now, looking back, when I go back home to the community, I see it from a completely different perspective, by the way. But I think that was one of the things that kind of led me to, one, stepping into the major toxic relationship that I had in my life. And two, I missed red flags because, one, I hadn't seen them. And two, I am the person who stepped into healthcare to take care of people, to help people, because my life satisfaction is, you know, giving. That's where I get, you know, my fulfillment. So the personality that I have is very adaptable. You know, I'm the one that will change who I am, what I'm doing, so that it makes somebody else's life easier. You know, and because I hadn't seen anybody or realized there was anybody that would step into my life for their reasons only, I missed every red flag there was. There's that meme that goes around that says, yeah, I saw the red flags, but I thought it was a carnival. Hmm. Like that was literally me. I'm like, oh, look, there's something new. Let's go over there. Not that I didn't, I had very strong feelings in my body when something wasn't right. And I'm going to say my story is different. Our stories aren't different. They're kind of different. They're, you know, but I did not want to go on a first date. I knew there was something that made me feel uncomfortable. But by the 7th time I was asked out, I started feeling guilty. This is also Dr. Heidi's MO. I feel guilty because I feel like I'm being mean, or I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt like I should. Or, what if they tell people that, I'm the bitch of the century? Or so I went out. Well, I didn't want to go on the second date. Same story. Didn't want to go on the third date. Same story. Didn't want to sleep with them. Same story. Didn't want to get married. Ended up pregnant. Was threatened. Married him that day. All of a sudden, 2 kids, a business. 14 years later, I ran away. So were there red flags? There were red flags before I ever met the guy. Did I miss them? Yes. Will we miss them? Yes. One reason is our personality will take it upon ourselves to change first. That was a red flag that they yelled at me, but I probably should have kept my mouth shut. So now, rather than looking at the fact that they yelled at you, now you're focusing on the fact that you should keep your mouth shut more. Because I can fix it and I don't like conflict. Somebody said something earlier today that was one of you guys about how we kind of adapt to the situation. I was such a conflict avoider, and I couldn't stand up for myself towards the end when I was basically fighting for my life. And one of you, because we had talked earlier, said something about you go from 0 to 180 in some of these things. And I remember that when I finally got out, there wasn't one single person that was ever going to take advantage, that was ever going to yell at me, and I went from this to literally chewing everybody out in my entire life. And then it takes you a minute to go, oh, okay, that's a little extreme, and you kind of have to back off. But any poor human resources person that you had to get on the phone to return an item, I would never do it. Well, now I'm ripping him a new one because I got the wrong color blouse or whatever, And so that was one thing that I thought was very different for me. But as far as red flags, as a chiropractor, and you are in healthcare as well, going through school, chiropractors very much believe in innate intelligence. And innate intelligence is the body is designed to heal itself. And the body's going to take care of itself. That's why hypothermia, quit sending blood to the extremities so it can keep the blood around the organs where life is. Red flags, I believe, are the same. Stepping into a relationship like this is like walking into a room that stinks. You stay in the room, the smell goes away. Okay, it's not because the room doesn't stink. It's because your body goes, that smell is terrible. Let's desensitize her smeller for a little bit so she doesn't have to continue to smell this. And when you're in relationships that aren't healthy for you, you get called a name one morning after you thought it was the great relationship, and you're upset and you're crying and you have to talk to them and you're mad. But if you get called that same name every morning for the first 15 mornings, you're not going to have the same reaction and the same feeling about it on the 15th day as you are the first day. You're going to start getting very desensitized, and you're going to realize, oh, maybe this is normal. So if you miss the red flags in the beginning, our personality is going to go, oh, that's because they had a bad day. Or, that's because I said too much. Or that's because I misunderstood. And we try to talk ourselves out of the fact that this is a red flag. Red flags are repetitive and they are cyclic. Everybody has the ability to throw red flags at other people. We all do. We all have the ability to be toxic. We can criticize. We can backstab with the best of them. But when it's not unrepetitive and it's not for the manipulative purposes of gaining something for yourself, it's just a toxic trait and you better get your shit together. But when you start seeing repetitive red flags, that's when you really have to start looking at the relationship. The problem is in the beginning. Even if you see them, you go, oh, there's a red flag, but I should have kept my mouth shut. So I'm just going to take this red flag and I'm going to stick it under the rug. So when you stick it under the rug, it takes you being able to recognize that it's a cycle away. Because if you saw 10 red flags on Tuesday and you had a really bad day and there was miscommunication, there was arguing, and so you're holding a whole bouquet of them, red flags, and you want to avoid conflict. So you make it through Tuesday because you're in survival mode. I'm going to make it through Tuesday. And on Wednesday morning, they get up like nothing happened and they give you a big hug and they tell you to have a good day at work and off they go. Okay, what are we supposed to do with this handful of red flags? Well, I'm definitely not going to bring it up because then we'll have a whole another handful of red flags. So we take them all and we shove them under the rug. So now we're getting all this stuff that we should be paying attention to out of our sight, thinking we've dealt with it. Because if you've had a bad day on Tuesday and they're okay on Wednesday, you're definitely not going to bring up what happened on Tuesday because then Wednesday's going to be a bad day too. And so it keeps us from seeing the cycle of red flags. That's one thing. The other thing, we choose not to see them because we make excuses for ourselves. We also, in the beginning, we may see them, but we're not sure we're seeing them. So we're very defensive for that person because we might be falling in love, or they might be fun to hang out with, or they might be really good looking. So we will justify their red flags to other people. Oh, they just had a bad day. Well, they don't normally yell at me, or they don't criticize the way I wear my hair. They don't normally do that. So then when you have to admit that I am finally seeing them, you've got the people that are going to go, well, we told you so. Okay. And we don't want to hear that either. So if we see them, the hard part is choosing ourselves because we're the ones that serve other people. So it's kind of second nature for us to serve ourselves. And then we don't want the I told you so's after we've had to eat crow about it. But in specific, the red flags, there's a lot of things that are red flag-ish. And they're not all the same in every relationship because not all toxic relationships are at the same level of toxicity. They can be extreme. It can be anything from the bully on the playground all the way up to, the man I ran away from, the ones that you guys dealt with, to the things we're seeing on Netflix. But the thing that I see is the commonality is the reason that the toxic person is in the relationship, their motivation for their behaviors. And it is a lot of times stems from insecurity in themselves. So they surround themselves with us, meaning our type of people who are willing to adapt so that we put them as a priority over us. So, when I work with people on, okay, we don't want to get in another relationship like this. Spotting the red flags is one thing. Choosing yourself and being able to say, if I never see you again, so what? That's the hard step for us. Because like me, I didn't want to be the bad person. I didn't want to be the bitch. I didn't want to make him feel bad because I didn't want to go out with him. So with knowing the red flags, there's red flags that we can make a list of that we know. Things like criticism, comparison, blame, taking up too much of your time, expecting you to give up things for them, deflection, saying you're too sensitive when you want to talk about your feelings, saying you're overreacting, denying any mistreatment is a red flag. You saw it, you felt it, you heard it, and they say, I didn't say that. And we deny it also. We make a lot of excuses in that. Another red flag is not apologizing sincerely. You're never going to get an apology that doesn't have strings attached. But because apologies come so few and far between, if we hear the words, I'm sorry, we're so excited that we heard the words, I'm sorry. We don't always listen to the follow-up words. Like, I remember being excited about an apology that went like this. I'm sorry I punched a hole in the wall, but you pushed my buttons. And I thought, oh my gosh, he just apologized. No, he didn't. He just blamed me for his behavior. And guess what I did? I went to work that day and wrote a list of the buttons I pushed and then thought, oh, I do. So because I could justify the fact that I could see how I pushed his buttons, I took responsibility for the hole in the wall.
Yeah.
So your apologies are always going to have strings attached.
So that brings up a really great question because red flags sometimes can be quasi or maybe even serious, but how do we step up and choose ourselves? What does that actually look like? Because some people would say, I'm going to cut and run, I'm out of here automatically. Mm-hmm. Are you suggesting that, or do you think there's another step that people should take before that?
I think people should cut and run, but not until they take another step. So I love the fact that you said that. I am not a mental health professional. My doctorate comes from chiropractic. Okay, so I don't treat, I don't diagnose any mental health conditions. I educate. Education and understanding leads to empowerment, which is eventually going to lead you to your freedom. I never understood it when I was in it. I didn't understand a lot of it until I was out of it. Now, a little bit about my deal, and I make sure all my clients know this. We are in the life of a toxic person for a reason. Okay. When we're in the relationships, we think it's because it's a normal relationship. We think our goals are the same, right? I'm stepping into this for companionship and partnership and intimacy and emotional support and the white picket fence, right? And the toxic personality has a different goal. They're stepping into it so you can help them be secure in their life. But we go through it thinking our goals are the same. So I didn't understand that, because when you're in it, all you look at is what they're going to say, what they're saying and doing, because you're in survival mode. If they say this, we're going to do this. If they do this, we're going to do this. If they're in a bad mood, keep the peace type of thing. And when I finally was able to see it for what it really is, I remember going, you've got to be fucking kidding me. This is so easy. Because you guys know, once you see it, it's like, how did I miss that? And because I didn't have anyone, I did 14 years in that relationship. And the day I ran away, I had been divorced for 2 years already. And nothing changed, except that there was 2 houses on the property and he could have girlfriends that weren't behind my back now. Okay, so all the money was still controlled. The kids were still controlled. The property was still controlled. All of that was still controlled. But I was so excited to have divorce papers in my hand. I thought I was free. So it's very important for me to, when I work with people, to let them know that they don't care if you're married or not, as long as you're still supplying them. Okay, then when I did end up leaving, I don't suggest this. And I if people work with me, I know enough now, we get you around this, but I had the accountant meet me and I signed the whole shooting match over. Patients, practice, property, and I left my kids. The divorce papers from 2 years prior had said 50-50. He refused to sign a parenting plan, but I had never researched divorce, so I didn't know that was necessary. Well, he clearly did, and he kept them for 5 years. So I have 2 daughters that I didn't see for their entire teenage years. And it was then that, it was the most heartbreaking 5 years of my life. But at about 4 years, I really believed that I would not have a relationship with them again. So I really started pouring into my business. And you guys will laugh at this, but you go through burnout in your business. I literally was going, yeah, whatever, get on the table. And I was it was just, and I don't like working that way. So I knew I had to add something, and I added women's retreats just for something new, on making yourself a priority. And I had never talked about what had happened to me and what went on, because I would have been in trouble if I talked about it when I was there. We practiced together. So I worked with him every day. I worked with him every day after we divorced for those 2 years. I never talked about it when we moved, because now I'm trying to build a new business. I'm trying to make new friends. How do you explain that? One, the minute you say you've been in an abusive relationship, people look at you different, right? Yeah. We don't care now because we've taken a stand and we're proud of ourselves. The other thing is, how do you explain that you're a mom that left 2 teenage daughters up there? And so I never ever talked about it. Well, by the 3rd retreat, all of a sudden I started talking about it. And I remember covering my mouth, and the ladies that were attending that retreat went nuts. I didn't realize that all these people that were coming to making themselves a priority were coming out of that. And so that's what kind of spurred this work. I always say, I did not choose this mission. This mission landed in my lap. The Lord said, you're going to be a chiropractor for 25 years while I train you for your real job. Right. And it's just funny how things in life happen. But I always go, if you would have told me, I would have paid better attention and taken notes. So it did kind of land in my lap. But I thought, okay, if you're going to do this and you're going to be able to help people at the level you need to be, you are going to have to figure out how to be the person you needed when you were going through it that you didn't have. And the understanding of the toxic relationship is what I didn't get. I knew what he said and did. If I had to write down everything he said and did, I would be here till 8 Christmases from now. We're very good at spotting that. But I never went far enough to ask myself the motivation behind it. Mm-hmm. And I started putting things together. And that was the day I went, are you kidding? And so, yes, I help people out of relationships for sure. I don't tell people that I think they should leave, because as you know, nobody's going to leave until they're ready. I do make sure that they know I don't care if they stay or go, but they need this information either way. So the first thing I do is, we all have our own perspective. Like, okay, Tara, just for instance, I know that you have been in a relationship that wasn't healthy, right? How many times did you look at him and think, how come you can't act normal? Mm-hmm. Like, how come you can't just be nice? Okay, this is the thing that I think is funny. Who says we're normal, right? But when we look at them, we think, how come you can't act normal? Because we all kind of operate the same. We're pretty emotional. We're pretty empathetic. So we only know how to see the world through our eyes. So when we think they're not acting normal, it's because they're not acting like us. Right? So then we have these big long talks, and if we use the right words and we wear the right color and we pick the right, then someday they're gonna get it. It's gonna sink in, and they're gonna wake up and act like us, which is normal. Right? And since we can't really wrap our head around very well how they think, because we only know how we think, I basically teach you to see the whole situation from their perspective. Because until you can see how they see every situation, all we're going to think is, how come you can't act normal? And then they blame us, and then we get on the treadmill of unrealistic expectations, and we'll do better, and when people are able to see it from their perspective, they'll say the same thing. You got to be kidding me. And then and only then they feel like they're equipped to make a decision. Because Carrie, I'm sure you've worked with hundreds of people that, well, they left, but they went back, right? Okay, I went back 6 times. And in the emotional abuse aspect, 2 of the times I went back, all he said, now, mind you, when I left, I'd run from Iowa to Montana, which is not a short little trek, by the way. All he had to do was say, I can't believe you're breaking up our family. Right? And that is emotional abuse, because he knows what he had to say to make me feel guilty. I didn't have anything to feel guilty about, but because he learned to control my feelings, I didn't take 2 seconds and go, wait, this isn't a family. Like there's nothing in this that resembles the family. I just went, oh! And I felt so guilty I had to go back, because we don't like feeling guilty. And the easiest way to get rid of it is do what they say, so that feeling of guilt goes away. One of the times I left, he told me he was really sorry. He was acting, but he had been diagnosed with cancer, and he didn't dare tell me because blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I moved back, and guess what? No EOBs, never heard about cancer again. And, but I used to think, how did I end up in this? And I feel like I'm a good person. How come, I have to go through this? My girls and I would never have known the extreme toxicity that he carried, because we lived in it. I've been doing this work for 8 years, and there's been maybe 1 or 2 that I would put over, I'm not comparing, but I mean, when the Lord said I was training, he if I would have known he was extreme, I probably wouldn't have survived, but that has helped me be very good at predicting their behavior. So I do write exit plans for people. A lot of people don't do that. I have to work with somebody one-on-one to do that, because I have to know exactly, what the specifics are. But yes, I do write exit plans. I do a lot of going through the divorce and going through the co-parenting, because, people think, oh, I'm getting divorced like me. This is going to be great. No, they're going to be the same person. And if you're still going to supply them like I did for 2 years, you're never going to get your life back. You're just going to have a piece of paper that means nothing, which is kind of what the marriage certificate to one of them meant also, right? They kind of mean nothing. But so having people understand the relationship, have them make the decision, and in the meantime, your identity. We have to start working on your identity. And sometimes you have to go through, what are my values? What do I want in my life? Tara, if I would have asked you when you were in it, what makes you happy? You'd go,
if he's happy. That's actually the answer.
Yeah.
If he's happy, I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, but that's residual emotional abuse. You get up on Tuesday, they're in a great mood. They pet the dog, they grab the coffee, they leave. What kind of day do you have that day?
Yeah.
Wednesday, same thing. You hear them yell at the kids. They're heavier coming down the stairs. They kick the dog, they grab their coffee, they leave. What kind of day do you have that day?
Yeah, crappy.
Crappy. And that's when we have given our feeling to someone else. Well, when you do that and you try to leave, one, they'll say, I can't believe you're breaking up our family. Or they'll say, I'm taking the kids away. Or they'll say, you're never going to get any money. And all those things are trying to make you feel something, feel fear or feel guilt or feel like you have to doubt yourself in the decision.
You're making so many good points. And that is, one of the things I want to kind of highlight what you're saying, because I want to extract out the points. One is that watch for consistent behavior. And if you're seeing somebody who is saying one thing and doing another thing, that's a really big red flag. But another one, and I think is a point that we often don't talk enough about, is try to see it from the other person's perspective. Don't interpret everything from your own, assuming your own good nature, your own empathic, compassionate self is what the same reasons, motivations that they're doing, that there may be a completely other angle that you're not considering. Mm-hmm. And I think the third thing that you're saying is, how do they make you feel? What does it feel like to be in your body and in your skin? And if your whole self is now governed by the mood of this other individual or the state of this person's treating you or treating the household or even setting the tone of the atmosphere, that's a problem, because you're shrinking yourself in order to make this person a healthier person or more functional. That's a warning that you're losing yourself to this relationship. I agree. I think we get so caught up in the idea of red flags of, oh, he asked me about my day, or he didn't overly give gifts, or he doesn't seem to be too perfect, too good to be true, or she doesn't seem to do this, that we think, oh, they've passed the red flags. But really, it's more subtle than that. It has to do with how we feel, how they make us feel about ourselves, and how we feel about ourselves in that context. So I love the points that you're making. It's such great points.
I think too, when the red flags show up in the beginning, you'll probably feel tense. Let's just say you went out on a date and they yelled at the waiter and you thought the waiter was nice. You would probably go, oh, that made me feel uncomfortable. And you'd kind of feel icky in your stomach. Now, by the time it's done, we would agree with them that the waiter wasn't that good. But your initial response of, oh, that made me uncomfortable, that's your red flag. Don't wait until you talk yourself out of it, but you'll have that feeling in your body, in your stomach, in your chest. And as you move through these relationships, you get used to having that feeling. Now, as a chiropractor and the whole innate intelligence thing, that feeling, that is your body's natural defense mechanism telling you something is wrong. Now, why in the heck are we talking ourselves out of the thing in our body that's protecting ourselves? But the longer you're in it, I literally had a pain in my stomach from the time I got up in the morning till the time I went to bed. I related it to being around him, but I didn't ever, and I'm educated. Here we go back with we're educated. How are we missing this? I just got so used to it. I now lived with the pain in my stomach. So I wondered how I developed an ulcer. Or, the other thing is people start getting anxious. That's your body's natural defense mechanism. And what do? I don't know. I just developed anxiety somewhere. No, you have. So when you get out of it, you really have to start paying attention. Your body knows where it's safe. And long before you know where it's safe, you'll notice there's a certain group of people you feel calm around. And there's other people or situations that you don't. That is your body telling you you're okay here. And the other ones, you're not okay there. Here's one. Who likes to network? Right? Would you ever walk in one of those rooms and not have this? Because you're walking into a den of vipers that are going to steal your business, and that's not true, but that's how I always felt going into those networking things. But I'd force myself to go. And finally, one day I'm like, I literally dread these things for 24 hours. Why are you even doing that? Because I started listening. I started thinking, I'm nervous the whole time I'm there. Don't do it. And it's the same thing. Now, triggers. After a relationship, your body is going to be used to certain things that it's going to recognize. You're in the grocery store one day and all of a sudden you have that tightness in your stomach, and you stop and you can feel yourself getting very anxious and you think, okay, what is happening? So you pause a minute and then you realize that the person that just walked past you was wearing the same cologne as the toxic personality. Okay. Your body didn't know anything. It didn't know you were in the grocery store. It didn't know who walked past you. All it knew was the last time we smelled that, you were in a bad spot. Yeah. So your body has learned these patterns of things to recognize to put you in survival mode. And those are tough because sometimes when you have triggers, you can't explain them to people, and it's pretty frustrating. And actually, we had talked earlier, but that's kind of what happened with me over the last couple years. I am married to the cutest man on the planet. I would marry him every day of my life. In fact, he finally, after being together for 15 years, was on my podcast with me for 4 episodes this spring. And he basically talked about how I ran away because I had met him, and he knew what he was getting into. Although he did say he didn't think it was half as bad as it was when it ended up. But, it's very, very difficult to explain to him. Well, he doesn't yell. He works in corporate. He's very calm. He rationalizes through everything. Not that he doesn't get frustrated. I mean, our relationship isn't perfect. We have discussions. He had to teach me not to fight. I was a trained fighter. And he was on the road, and I had to pick him up from the airport. Well, we had kind of had a not great discussion on the phone. And don't ever have not great discussions on the phone. Just wait, right? Okay. The survivor will not wait to settle anything, right? We're going to do it. We're going to do it right now because I don't like this feeling. And if we don't do it now, I'm going to be sick all night. That's how we think. So we had this discussion on the phone that didn't go that great, but I'm kind of far enough now that I'm like, we'll talk about it tomorrow. He's not going anywhere. I pick him up from the airport, and it must have kind of went in his head, and he started talking in the car. And I immediately had a overwhelming awful. I started shaking. I was driving. He got irritated. Of course, called me a basket case. Wasn't that lovely? Yes, let's. He had never seen anything like this ever in the 15 years. And I couldn't catch my breath. So, I mean, and he's scared because I'm not driving that well, and we're in 4 lanes. So I pulled off. He is literally thinking, what in the hell? Because it was like I was out of my body. Right. And of course, then I start crying. It breaks his heart. He cannot handle me crying. It breaks his heart. So I'm in the passenger seat, doing the whole typical curl up, avoid this thing. We had a 3-hour trip. Okay. Well, about an hour later, he just says, you know what? I hate feeling like this in the car. So we'll talk about it tomorrow. Let's just get down to the lake and let's, whatever. And he always comes back around to it. But this was the worst ever. Well, when we got to the lake, he fell asleep. And of course I couldn't, because that's how we operate. And I realized my former used to pick fights with me in the car. Mm-hmm. And I had never, ever had something that was, I wanted to jump out of the car. It wasn't, I didn't want to kill myself. I just wanted to get out of there. Logically, I knew it was my husband. Logically, I knew I was safe. Logically, but you could not have told my body any different, because it was like the last time you were trapped in a car and someone had raised their voice, it was a bad deal. Yeah. And that was the first of the couple of years. And I'll tell you, I know that my husband was just like, and logically, even when he called me a basket case, we don't like that because we already heard that for the last, but logically, if I would have been looking at myself, I probably would have agreed, but it was so devastating to me that I was doing it again after so long. So I've really had to piece together a lot more pieces of healing than I had thought. But those are the things that people don't realize. Like even the people that support you, they don't realize the things that you have to do every day. And my daughters, I left them when they were 11 and 13. I knew I wasn't the mom they needed. I also knew that if I kept covering up his behavior to them, they would be 40 years old, living in his basement, trapped like I was. And they were tough. They were just as tough as me. And they ran away also when they were 17 or 19. And they deal with all of this also, and now at least I can explain it. But this is another thing. You have to understand it so well in order to go, oh, okay, that sometimes, I don't know, Tara, do you feel like you're exhausted sometimes?
Yeah. It's really sometimes I can relate a lot to the trauma responses just coming out of nowhere and how it can just take some time to figure that out. I remember I used to have issues This is actually with my ex-husband, but this was actually back with my childhood. My mom used to have this. My mom was just a bitch. Probably narcissistic. Who knows? But she would beat the shit out of my sister and me if we loaded the dishwasher wrong. And I remember my ex-husband would want me to load the dishwasher, and I would just be so resistant to loading the dishwasher. And it wasn't until I was able to piece that together of like, literally this paralyzing fear of if I load the dishwasher wrong, it's going to lead to X, and how it can just pop out of nowhere. And in my experience, I think it pops up when we're ready for it. That's been my experience. So like I was finally ready and had the space and the safety to be able to handle that specific situation. And
but you have to look at it from that point of view, because if you don't look at it from that point of view, you're like, it is so funny that you just said the dishwasher thing, because when I give examples of criticizing, been married 11 years, you've been loading the dishwasher for 11 years. And one day they say, how can you load the dishwasher like that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now the next day you don't load the dishwasher the way you did, even though it's been working for 11 years and you're pretty sure it was okay. Now you load the dishwasher. And I said that on a podcast, and you wouldn't believe how many messages I got that said, how did you know the dishwasher thing? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you said that.
I think the thing that I'm hearing from you is so pivotal, and it's pivotal in the beginning and the middle and the end, is really learning how to tune into ourselves, tune into our bodies, and learning to recognize when we're feeling unsafe. I think there's a lot of conditioning many of us have had, either because we've been in other toxic situations or because the culture conditions us that to not pay attention to these signals inside of ourselves. But I love the way that you've emphasized that when we hear ourselves feeling tense, not free to be ourselves, we should slow down and start asking big questions. So thank you so much for pointing that out today, Dr. Heidi.
I think the thing that I lacked and that now I have, which might help some, is I could logically go, okay, now he came home from work and he's not talking. This is my now husband. Okay. He came home from work and he's not talking. What did I do? Yeah. Like I got to the place where I could logically go, well, I'm sure it wasn't anything I did.
Yeah.
But I would still feel like I was in trouble. And so one day he said, Heidi, if it's something to do with you, I'll tell you. Normally if I come home from work quiet, it's because something happened at work. You don't even think that. You immediately think you've disappointed me somehow. Right. So the strategy I put in place there is if he came home and he was quiet or maybe a little cranky, I would literally go in the bathroom and I would say, he told me that if it was something to do with me, he would tell me, which means he hasn't told me, so it's nothing to do with me. Like I have to have a strategy for everything in order for me to really be able to, okay, put this in a box. Now we can put it on a shelf because I think Dr. Heidi finally got it, and I think that's hard for people because the way you explain the changing of the brain, it's way easier to revert back to that than it is to go in the bathroom and go, okay,
So true.
So it's tiring, but it's the little strategies that have really helped me.
So where can people, the more we do it.
Mm-hmm. It does build. Absolutely. So where can people find you? Tell us about where your podcast is and how to find you personally.
Okay. So my website is Coaching with Dr. Heidi, and my podcast is on there, but my podcast is called It's Not Normal, It's Toxic. It's on all major platforms. I have a support group on Facebook called Strength Within, and I just recently started a community. Obviously, not everybody can afford private coaching, and there's certain times of the year my private coaching is full. So I did just announce last night, I did start a co-parenting community also to teach people how to change the way they interact. Instagram, Facebook, they're all Coaching with Dr. Heidi.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Have a question or comment? Email us at hello@breakingfreewithcarrieandtara.com. If this episode's been helpful, consider becoming a supporter. And if you haven't yet, make sure to follow us at Breaking Free from Narc Abuse on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. We'll see you back here next time.